Hello and welcome to the PPW Pod, bringing you news, views, and interviews from the world of PropTech and real estate marketplaces. My name is Edmund Keith. I'm the editor of onlinemarketplaces.com. I'm joined, as always, by Simon Baker. How are you doing, Simon?
Very well, Ed. It's great to see you.
And I'm joined this week by Hannah Parker from, am I right in thinking you're in France today?
Yeah, Bordeaux.
Okay, Hannah is the CPO of Addland, which is a UK-based real estate portal / I guess you'd call it, investigation and research portal, mainly for land, but also other properties as well. That's not the reason that I wanted to get Hannah on today. Hannah's actually got a very interesting and expansive CV in the world of real estate marketplaces. Actually, quickly, Hannah, why don't you give us a bit of background of your career, who you've worked for in the past?
Okay, sure. I always think I'm a little bit of like a dinosaur now in the prop tech space. But I actually started out originally client side, working for one of the big UK agency groups, like literally learning the ropes, registering people, doing kind of walking around fields and appraisals and property viewings and stuff. And then this little company had started by a man called Alex Chesterman called Zoopla. And it was really interesting at the time, just seeing kind of the evolution of the digital movement that was happening. And it was really interesting to me. So I went over and started, and this was kind of about 2011. So it was only a couple of years old then. It was still in a small building, this little office. And I was with them for a few years, all the way through to the IPO. And then I went over and joined a company called Property Finder with the great Michael Liani, who was kind of really expanding the empire of the Property Finder group across the Middle East and North Africa, and went and joined kind of the journey there for looking at kind of ways of expanding more of kind of the digital relationship with the new build sector, and how to create kind of these great lead generation models that could be replicated in multiple countries. And then I had a call from a friend of mine who at the time was at a company called HomeTrack. HomeTrack are the leading AVM providers for banks, so the big valuation provider in the UK. And they'd just been acquired by Zoopla, and they were looking at how can we move some of these like real niche kind of finance products into this mass market opportunity in the real estate sector. So I was like, well, maybe this could be really interesting to come in. And then not long after I got there, the big American boots of Silver Lake came in, and they were like, "Wait, we're going to buy you up, and then we're going to change everything." And then there was a lot of change that went on there. So I've been kind of more deeply involved in more of the data side of products that have then kind of moved between that crossover between B2B, B2B2C, and direct to consumer. And I was there for a couple of years. I went there for a year, but those contracts never last a year, do they? They always end up expanding. And then I decided to move away from some of the big groups and move over to startup land. So I joined Addland just over 3 years ago now, when it was just a very small prototype. And we've worked to build the business up. We've launched just over 2 years ago now. And building that up is really trying to have a kind of data solution to the industry. And though we started off focusing on land, we are quite agnostic to look at all types of property, land, and everywhere else. So
Hannah, Ed, before you jump in, I was actually listening to your story going, you don't realise this, but our paths have intertwined three times. But I'll tell you the 3 times. You started off with Alex at, I guess you were in Southwark in London.
Yeah.
That
Just
office you were in is
yes.
the old Property Finder UK office.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember that very, very well because we set that up there a very long time ago before Property Finder was merged into Zoopla.
Yeah.
Then you went to work with Michael in Property Finder Dubai. Same name, different company. But the reason he named that is because it was all part of the REA group at that time. And so I know Michael very well. But what you probably don't know is I used to be a director of HomeTrack.
I didn't know that one.
There you go. So
Wow.
all your path has intertwined with mine, clearly a decade apart. We'll put that to one side. But it's interesting how in those circles that everyone actually touches many of the same businesses over that.
I think I said to Edmund on our call, it's so funny how it's a lake, right? It's a really small lake that we all play around with, and different people kind of move into different places, but there's always the connection that's in there.
Yeah, and now I know, Ed, you've got a bunch of questions, but I am curious. One thing I'd like to know more about Addland, because I haven't really looked at it much. I know of it, but not much about it. I think before we dive into some of the product related issues and so on, it'd be really good to understand, more about
we're a baby,
what you're doing and how you're doing it differently to everyone else.
I mean, we are only a few years old, and we are a baby in this space. And like every startup, you spend so much time just trying to find funding to move you forward. It can always slow down actually really what you want to try and do. And things have changed an awful lot. We were there in the middle of COVID, so the market changed, new players changed, the industry changed a lot, and we had to pivot quite a great deal. So though the business started off very much with a focus on creating more of a niche space for land. And when I first looked at this, I really thought there's a gap here in the digital space. I've been around kind of the more of the real estate, residential and new build areas for such a long time. Land sits in the middle of that ecosystem, but there isn't really a good digital place for that, in terms of like marketplace, in terms of research, and having it as a single solution. So I thought this was really interesting. But turns out it's really hard to try and break down some of those behaviors that have been really manual, institutionalized. And there are a lot of other players as well that are trying to do the same thing. And there's only a certain amount of money available. The share of wallet just gets more and more watered down. And we started to organically get a lot of interest from general consumer traffic and more of this like residential crossover, which started to become really interesting. And me having this kind of property and resi head on, I was like, we could explore this a little bit more. So we started to see how, if we became a bit more agnostic in the use cases for it, how can we really push our vision of actually making data more available to everybody, but get it more into the hands of the residential players. Now, whether that is a kind of, let's say, a DIY consumer who wants to take it upon themselves to do more research themselves before they move into the transaction process, which there are more and more of those, unearthing. Whether that's an agent who wants to increase their service levels by being real the expert in the room and really knowing their area and needing to have access to more localized data and risk data, or whether that's more of the kind of architect players, lab promoters, and that sort of side. We can really kind of surface everyone with having the same need. Like, the problem still exists for everybody. Is how do I access data in a way to make it meaningful and efficient for my business? So that's really the heart of our business. And now we really kind of push. I call our team like the geospatial hoovers. Like, they just suck up data everywhere they can. Our job is to translate that into something that can be easy to understand, that's accessible for everyone, both on price point and usability. And you can eat it however you want, whether that's taking a subscription to the platform and interacting with the data that way, using pre-built aggregated reports, or through API services. So, however you want to eat it, that's up to you. That's your business and how it works. We just want to be the solution provider to bring that all together into one place.
So I'm having a look at it now and having a bit of a play around. A couple of questions. Who is your exact target audience for this?
So currently, our move is very much towards more of the niche agent market. You have limited budgets, right? I mean, I'd love to say we go for the consumer and let's just go at it and we can really help solve the solutions. But I don't have 100 million in my back pocket, like, to be able to create this brand awareness.
You're not CoStar.
I'm not CoStar. No, I hear they've got some spare cash. If they want to throw some over, more than happy to take it. Building a consumer brand takes a lot of time and a lot of money, and it's very difficult to go after. And if you focus on that, the problem is you're not focused on actually building a great product. It might be a bit more boring. It's not as sexy to go after the consumer and do everything. But I genuinely believe that you have to kind of do one thing, do it really well, and then try and broaden yourself out. So right now, our target is really going towards the expert agent end to help like the B2B2C route. If I can utilize the agent to get us, I would say use the agent. I don't want to say that in a negative term, but to help them give us an avenue to get us awareness in the living room. Like that's the human connection that happens right now. Now, if we can bridge the gap of saying, we'll support you in being the best agent you can, and at the same time, they're providing us an avenue direct to the consumer, we hope that over time, that gap between the awareness of who we are and our authority in this space can start to be naturally closed down, but at the same time, still supporting the B2B side of the business.
Okay. And is this a SaaS model? So for me to get to the pro version, I join as a member and pay. How much do I pay as I guess as an agent for this? I can tell £29 a month or
so the price point starts low. It starts at an accessible price point. We want to make sure that, you know, as an SME, you can come in and do it. All of this data has traditionally been shrouded in like lots of different phrases that are hard to understand and different products that are hard to access and really only for the elite. Well, we want to say, no, let's break that down. This is data that's important to everybody in the ecosystem, everybody that is making a critical decision, whether that from the business side or from the consumer side. We want to make that as available to everyone. So the price point, we have to be really careful about how we build something that retains margin, but is also an accessible product that, you know, a single operator can access. And a user, a consumer user who wants to be able to access this, you know, someone who takes their credit score licenses and other things, you know, someone that really takes ownership of that. Let's make it accessible for those people as well.
Yep. No, it makes a lot of sense. Before I hand back to Ed, I'm going to introduce you to the guys at Harness. I don't know if you know Harness Data. Okay, they're UK based, very, very, very good at data, more on the commercial side. Yeah. I think you two coming together could actually solve a number of problems. One is, I think you could have an even better product. Or two, I think you would have a more compelling sales proposition, and thus can drive revenues faster, and thus raise more money. And
we're always open for those things.
I'll do an introduction. The guy's name's Ben. Ben Mean.
Ben. Okay.
Sorry, Ed. Just
it's all right, it's all good.
A bit of matchmaking here.
You actually kind of touched on a point there that is basically the crux of what I want to ask and kind of why I wanted to get Hannah on, which is you've got all these amazing data layers. You can go on Addland and look at, you know, if the property you want to buy is going to be affected by coastal erosion. You can see where are the power lines. You can see if you're, you know, even let's say you wanted to grow potatoes in your backyard, you can see what kind of soil you have. You can see planning, zoning, all this kind of stuff. How difficult was it to get all of this data? And I'm kind of going a step further in assuming that if you as a startup can get all this data, Rightmove could get all this data, but they choose not to. How difficult was it to get? And would it be fair to say that other portals could and maybe should have some of this data?
So I have to be careful about how I answer, because in my heart, I believe that everybody should have access to this data, and it's our job in the industry and as prop tech providers and builders to help the industry in that sense. At the same time, getting it isn't necessarily the problem. A lot of the data that we're talking about is government-owned data, it's open source data. However, putting it all together starts to become really complex, because we're not talking just around getting a data file and then plotting on the map. We try and put everything at a single point of truth. Now, rather than just using, you know, a dot on a map, like an XY coordinate, we're trying to always connect it back to the legal point of truth, which is your title. When you buy a property, it's not the front door you're buying, it's that legal boundary that you're buying when you go through the transaction. And that kind of get lost in the normal sort of, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Smith buying a house. Like, you don't really understand that until you start to go kind of quite deep into the conveyancing process in the UK. Where we want to stick to that like legal boundary that you own as your point of truth. So when we look at data and the intersect of data in terms of shapes and how it impacts the boundary of your property, we want to be able to tell you that, you know what, there is some ancient woodland that sits at the back of your property, but actually, do you know you need to keep a 50-meter buffer from the edge of your property if you're going to dig into that, because you have to protect the trees. If you're going to change your mortgage provider and you're looking at different insurance products, your proximity to a flood zone, which are changing, more and more rapidly because it's raining so much, that's going to maybe impact your potential opportunities in the future, whether that's your cost of living there because your premiums are going to go up, your saleability later on, or your risk when you want to buy it. So there's all this different information that pinning it to a center point of truth, that's where the complexity starts. So you need to have quite a deep understanding of how geospatial data works to be able to make that mapping all happen. You have to have a very good understanding of the way that the different geography polygons are broken up. Now, in the UK, it's horrible. There are other parts of the world where it's much more kind of straight line. The UK is horrible data, geography data. So it takes an awful lot of smart people to be able to then translate that.
I take your point, Hannah, and I not for a second do I doubt that it's difficult and complicated and all the rest of it. But Rightmove could have just hired people. They could have hired you, for example, and done this themselves, right? They could have done this.
Yeah.
And as we've already said, it's definitely in the interest of the consumer. At the moment, if you go on Addland, it kind of feels, I guess, to the average consumer is a little bit intimidating. Mm-hmm. But if you look at, for example, homes.com in the US, they've got a lot of these data layers.
Yeah.
I guess my point is, I just want you to say, yes, these other portals are lagging behind, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they can, but does it deviate away from their core? Yes. And, like Rightmove, it's high risk for them to deviate away from their core. Their core market is coming from subscription services and, let's face it, lead generation. That's their business. And if they deviate away from that, how much does that impact, not working on some of their other core? It's a much higher risk.
Fair enough. I'm talking of Rightmove, and this might be a sensitive subject. You can say no comment. Addland has a data layer called market activity, which is done, I'm assuming, via an API in partnership with Rightmove. What's the story there? Are Rightmove interested in Addland? They're obviously interested enough to give you some data, right?
Give, maybe not. They are interested enough to provide some data for us. And we've had conversations. They have a great data team at Rightmove. We started conversations with them not long after Johan took over. And I think he's got some fantastic ideas. I don't know what they are. I'm not on the inside channel on that one, but I'm sure that they have some amazing ideas about what they want to do. And I know data will be a big focus for them. We wanted to enhance the kind of comparable experience for them, but we want to remain very respectful to not take away from some of their own comparable products that they have. But for us, it's more about just pinning that data together into one place rather than just having a single product. It's gluing it all together. So they do provide us data. It's not an API, actually. It's on a weekly update that they send us over. And we then kind of glue that to everything else that we have just to expand on that information. So we're not competing with them from a marketplace perspective. It's just appending it into the other data. But we're friends.
Fair enough. No, it makes sense. I think it makes sense. Totally. Yeah. Moving away from Addland for a minute, you've obviously helped build products at some big name portals, as we've already established. Kind of to what extent do you look at what other marketplaces around the world are doing in your job now and go, okay, that looks like a good idea from this marketplace in, I don't know, New Zealand, and this one looks like a good idea in, I don't know, Hong Kong, and try and implement those ideas in what you're doing now? And how much of it is kind of just intuition and experience from you having, worked at Zoopla and Property Finder and places like that? How much do you go and try and find good new ideas?
I'm such a geek on all of the prop tech businesses and portals around the world. I've loved it. I mean, I've been doing it for many years now. So I always keep track of kind of what's going on. Though I do think that things are sometimes can look really exciting and interesting, but they regionally they just don't transfer over to different markets. So when you look at things, you have to really understand what's the commonality with the problem. And though a market, maybe a new portal in Japan might have a great solution to do it, but that doesn't necessarily mean just because it looks cool and it looks like it's the same problem that it's going to work in different markets. Property Finder are one of the unique businesses that have been able to replicate their model in multiple countries, but multiple countries that share a very, very clear commonality in the brokerage model and the transaction process. If you look at how the UK market works, it's very, very different to how it works in America, to how it works in the UK, to how it works in Europe, sorry. And therefore, translating some of those products, it just doesn't always fit. So I do look at things for inspiration, but I try and then maybe look at how we could adjust something like that to make it interesting and make it work. Data is a little bit easier to flow because some of these things are more common, right? Like you don't want to build a house in a flood risk zone, no matter where that is in the world. Like you still need information to do it. You still need to get diagnostic reports about risk and opportunity about your property. That remains the same. But anything that's a bit too close to the transaction element, I think that's where you have to have quite deep understanding of a local market to understand how that could translate.
Yeah, completely agree. In fact, I was actually updating my presentation for PropTech and Portal Watch coming up later this year. Good little opportunity for a plug. I have a slide that's almost exactly what you just said there. I might even take what you used and put it in a quote.
Yeah,
I do think what you raise is a very interesting issue from a product management perspective. Is that too often people build products that they're passionate about but have zero market or minimal market fit, and they become almost blinded with blinkers on, and as they go down this path until they realize that no one's buying their product, but boy, it's very sexy. It does a wonderful job. And it's very important to understand what is the real pain point within the market, and are you solving one of those pain points? And if you are, then you're going to make money, and if you're not, then you end up with a vanity product, which is much harder to sell.
There's loads at the moment. AI has caused a huge amount of shiny stuff in the corner that it's great for PR, but actually, does it solve a problem in individual markets? Some of them are real nice to have products, and they end up being really expensive ones to go down. So my team would love to go and work on all this cool stuff, but sometimes you just have to do the boring things because that's what works to solidify yourself.
So actually, you raise an interesting question there. How do you think about AI and the opportunity it creates for you? How is it a friend? Is it an enemy? Is it a frenemy in this sort of scheme? Is it an opportunity for you to move the business in a new direction? How do you think about AI and what it can actually do for your business?
I mean, AI it's talked a lot at the moment, like new things that are happening. But this has been around for a long time. Like machine learning products has been around for a long time, especially when you're working with data. This isn't new. It's just sexy at the moment, right? It creates a lot of PR. I think some of the technology advancements cannot not make changes, right? We work in technology. There's some new technologies emerging. Businesses that are tech businesses will have to embrace and move forward. That's just evolution of how things work. I think some of the portals who are wholly reliant on eyeballs and advertising as their main commercial revenue stream, I think have the biggest risk, because some of the benefits of AI, they're just connecting people to product faster, and they're reducing some noise. I mean, like the new updates from Siri that was this week, last week, they were just announced. I mean, you can even use Siri as your new concierge tool to try and find like properties that are matching up to you. So rather than spending time scrolling through things and using those portals as more of like an entertainment facility, I think AI is going to really reduce that time on site and more about speed to matchment. And anyone that is really focused on their core commercial model about needing eyeballs on site for long periods of time for advertising revenue, I think that's where you'll see some commercial models start to shift.
Yep. I'm gonna challenge that a little bit though. I think there's a category by category issue here. So if I'm shopping for milk, or Oatly barista milk, right, which I happen to buy, I don't care where I get it from. I know what I want, and if I can go, hey Siri, can you order half a dozen Oatly barista milks. Thanks very much. Have it delivered. And I don't have to go on to Instacart or whatever it is that I might be using in whatever market I'm in. I can see the absolute benefit of that from an AI perspective. But for the majority of people buying a house, it is such... I just have Siri talking to me in the background now.
Was that what that was?
That was Siri who actually heard me. This is the problem. It's always listening. Siri and the US government, I guess. So anyway, as well as the Chinese, I don't know. Anyway, someone's listening. I think the challenge is when you're buying a house or renting less because it's about speed in many markets, but buying a house, it's such a big decision for 90% of people. That speed and just give me what I want, I think is a theoretical nicety, but is actually not a practical reality. Okay. And I think that people will search before they hand over what is going to be probably 80-90% of their wealth will be tied up in that house. So I think that's why it takes 3-4 months for people to find the right house, and that's why they go and look at 20 houses, and that's why they argue with their husband and wife about what they want. Is it the backyard? Is it close to schools? There's so many things that go into what is a fundamentally life-changing decision, that to hand that over to AI and go, hey AI, can you hey X, can you tell me what's for sale in this area? Or to me, I just don't think people will ever feel really comfortable. And we could say, yeah, but the new generation, they'll do that. The new generation hasn't got any money.
Yeah,
that's the other problem, right? And they can't afford the houses. And the people who are going to be buying the majority of the houses in the majority of the market, especially in the UK market for the foreseeable future, are those who are going to be either already in a house and upsizing because of family and whatever, or downsizing over time. And the new entrants will be a much smaller percentage of the market. So my challenge would be, I think AI is all about what happens in the background to make the experience more immersive, so that when I am online and I am looking at a property, the role of the Rightmoves of the world is to make me feel like I'm already living in the place. So because if you think about buying a house, a lot of that decision-making process is an emotional connection to the outcome.
Yeah, I mean it's hearts and minds, isn't it? You have to find that balance between the two, and that's why some of the different digital-only ways of doing things, it doesn't work in markets whether it's too emotionally driven. I was around with some of the digital-only transactions that worked in Middle East and Southeast Asia because it's a head move, right? It's an investment move. Therefore, people don't have the emotional attachment. They're happy to be able to put their trust in digital only transactions to move it forward. But when you're talking about someone's home, this is where they're going to create memories. This is where they're going to live with their family. This has to be something that it's so much more of an emotional decision that has been made. The technicalities is just more like, can I protect myself because if this is so much of my net worth is tied up from this. It's also a bit of ego status and things like that get wrapped up to it. So I completely agree with you. I think I probably didn't explain so well when I was saying about the connection with AI. I mean more kind of speeding up like that filtering process of property. So rather than kind of scrolling through pages of like detailed search results pages, it will be more around direct content.
Yeah,
on the
potentially. Once again, I'd argue. I think the challenge. No, but I just want to push that idea a little bit further, right? Because if you think about from a product perspective, the biggest issue in buying a house is the fear of missing out on a unique deal. If I'm going to spend, what's the average price in the UK? £400,000 or something?
A bit less, yeah.
A bit less, called 300,000, 350 or something. The biggest fear I've got if I'm investing £300,000, which probably 250,000 is being lent by the bank, and I'm becoming an indentured slave to the bank for the next 10 years. If I'm going to do that, I want to make sure I'm getting the best opportunity, which means I will scroll through. If I'm a serious buyer, not the tire kickers out there, but the serious buyers, they're going to scroll through all the properties, whether it's on the first page or on page 20, because they want to make sure they're not missing out on the needle in the proverbial haystack. Okay. And I think there's something in that. And I think then the challenge from a product management perspective is, how do I learn about me as an individual? Where am I in that cycle? Am I a tire kicker? So I'm just looking at bedrooms and bathrooms for ideas for renovation or something, or I'm just bored, or I've already got a house in the area and I just want to see what's for sale and what's my house worth, right through to a kid's on the way, and I know within 6 months I've got to be out of here and into something bigger. And by the way, I've already got the loan pre-approved and X, Y, and Z. So it's all the things are lined up. Learning more about me, I think, then allows you to better present the listings.
Personalize the experience a lot more.
So how do you think about personalization? Actually, that's probably a good question.
It's matchmaking. Like personalization, I think it's key to matching you up and kind of opening opportunities as well. Like, you're not marketplace they need to remain, as much as they have premium products to have placements and stuff, they have to remain the trusted neutral source of someone to go to say, I can go here because I can get the biggest amount of opportunities open to me without bias, without someone saying you have to buy this one, it's the best one, and I can make my own mind up. And the more you can add personalization to that and understanding who you are. I mean, you talked just a second ago around two very different types of audiences. One, the active buyer, the one who they're making that journey into that transaction. Like they're in the mindset, the trigger point has happened, and they're in. But you're talking around a really small minority. I mean, you've got let's take Rightmove at the moment. You've got just over 100 million visits a month.
Yeah,
there's
that
only
many buyers in the UK.
But there's about 1.2 million transactions, right, that happen in the UK every year. And of that, about 65% of them are owner occupier. So, you're talking like, there's 700 to 800,000 transactions that happen. And so the numbers don't add up, right? So you say, well, what are these other people doing? The majority of traffic on most portals around the world are passive. They're the people that aren't actively looking. They're not putting the house on the market. They're not with a mortgage broker. They are browsing, right? They're looking at what is on the market down the street. They're looking at, like, how does that affect my asset? So coming back to what everyone was saying about, like, having like more availability of data, I think that's where it fits together really nicely. Because if you're looking as a passive person, whether you're a renter, whether you're still living with your parents, whether you're in your fourth house move that's there, you're interested in what's happening outside and near me to affect how that's going to affect my home right now, my asset, my evolution, my quality of life. And if you know more about me from a personalization route on the portals, then my experience isn't just going to be highly valued when I'm in the transaction space. My experience with you actually is going to be highly valued much longer throughout my ownership term and into other areas. And that leads on to huge amounts of other kind of value add monetization opportunities as well. Yep. Which I think the portals missed right now.
Yeah, I've got a question for you about how, if you were the head of product at a Rightmove or an REA in Australia or Celliger or Scout24, it doesn't matter, right? And you've got this traditional model built on sort of a free standard listings and premium and super premium and super premium, and the more you pay, the more you're at the top of the search and so on. How do you think about balancing personalization, so give me what I am actually looking for, and monetization? And can the two truly be balanced in such a way as not to damage existing revenues?
It's really hard, right? You're going to have to, if you say, okay, I'm gonna give you, Edmund, you tell me everything you want to know, like everything you're looking for, everything that's important for you, and I'm gonna then personalize your experience and match you up to the best curated journey on the website and product matching, everything that's going to meet what you need. But at the same time, Simon, you're an agent and I want to extract as much share of wallet from you as possible. So if you pay me, I'll make sure that your product features in Edmund's list. Then who are you servicing at that point?
Yes. Well, portals are middle people, right? They're neither the customer nor the buyer.
You have conflict, right? So you're there, and at some point you've got to ask yourself, like, who is more important to me and where you want to be? And I think that really comes down to where your position is in the market at that time. If you're an established brand and you're at the top, like if you're a Rightmove, you've got to do an awful lot to lose that trust of the consumer, because that's embedded behavior that's in there. That's like you Google it, you Rightmove it, you Zillow it, like you are so embedded in that mindset from a consumer perspective. You've got to go a long way to break that trust. If you were on the market and you were trying to establish something different, I would be all out for the consumer. I remember like early days of Zoopla. Alex was adamant, like, if you had an idea, we're going to make loads of money with this. If it impacted the user experience, the consumer experience, out the door. Yeah, I remember Pierre at Property Finder the same. Does that impact the user experience? No, out the door. It's not happening. As you're building yourself up, I don't think you can do anything to damage that trust. Once you've established it, then I think you can push a bit more and find that balance a little bit easier. You've got a bit more playroom then.
You've raised some interesting thoughts here around depth of brand. I call it depth of brand, meaning, take Rightmove. It's been around for nearly 25, nearly 30 years, I guess. Yes. Was it 96-ish?
Nearly 30 years, yeah.
Whenever they had that Ian Wright doing the Rightmove campaign back in, I can't remember exactly what it was, like 97, 98, 99, sometime around that. So there's the power of the brand, right? And the 20 to 30 years investment in that. And then you're on the market. Okay, so you're in the UK. You're seeing this bit of a war that's occurring. You have the on the market, the agent, what was the listed agent owned, led portal purchased by the CoStar guys from the US with seemingly bottomless pockets full of money, endless and money to throw at the problem. Have they got any chance against a brand as established as Rightmove, or is it really sort of up to Rightmove to lose through stuffing it up
on the market? Rightmove, like
she's biased. She already said she's friends with Rightmove.
Yeah, I'm friends with everybody. They've committed a lot of money. Was it 50 million that they want to spend in the third year? We haven't seen any of it yet, but like they've committed to it. I'm sure September, that's normally when UK portal stuff starts pushing out a lot more. So we'll see what happens. But 50 million, it's a lot of money, right? So if I have 50 million for marketing, we spend zero, right? Because we don't have any, but that's a lot. But to go up against Rightmove, who are currently, what's their profit margin at the moment? 70%?
Yeah, 75, yeah.
Well, I mean, I can laugh 50 million, it's nothing, but really for Rightmove, it isn't. Like, they could counter that really easily if they wanted to. Whereas if they went over against Zoopla, different game. I like, and it's to win the consumers right now, which is what they want, right? OTM, they got to win the consumers first. Like, they're now not a brand preference for the consumer right now. Though their traffic is about 10, 15 million less than Zoopla's at the moment per month. They need content. If I was Jason right now, I would be like, free listings. Get every listing on there, get everything on there, and then develop and then work out how to monetize either the audiences or the agents in different premium products. But if you're going to win in that space, you need content. If you don't have the content, the consumer's just going to stick with what they know.
But if you're a consumer, okay, and let's assume that Rightmove has I don't know, 90% of the listings in the market. It'll be way up there.
Yeah.
Okay? Zoopla can't be that far behind in terms of volume of listings.
No.
And even if on the market has 90%, where's the differentiation? Truly, from a consumer perspective, given the most important thing to a consumer is having all the listings in one place.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, don't talk to me. So that's your starting point.
Yeah.
Do
You can't.
the
Well,
consumers
hang on.
care?
I'm going to jump in here for a second. In terms of differentiation between portals like that, right? We said earlier that a lot of these portals don't want to add all these extra data layers that exist that are out there, etc. And Hannah made the good point that actually, if you do start adding all these extra data layers, it can interfere with their commercial models. All of that, absolutely take it, understand it. But there is now the example of homes.com. And you say, well, in America, they have a different commercial model. Homes.com doesn't have a different commercial model. It has a subscription, pay for eyeballs business, and it has all of these data layers, and it is using all of these data layers, all this neighborhood guides that they've gone and produced as its differentiation for the consumer. Why couldn't we? Do you think we could see that in the UK potentially? You know, Zoopla or somebody deciding, do you know what? I'm going to throw all the data at my product that I possibly can, and that is going to be my moat.
Well, there are some external influences that are happening as well to the industry in the UK at the moment. Like when you were saying like on the homes.com, one of the benefits on homes.com is they have the what's it called, the M&S, right? So when they had 90% of the listings like directly when CoStar came in, so they didn't have to fight for content quite so hard, but they're just adding an additional benefit to their product to try and attract like the best agents to come in and create this best experience. In the UK, it's of like fight for content king, and everyone to get on board. But there is another movement that's happening, which is kind of an external influence, which is around the agents having to provide, I don't know if you know much about the material information. Okay, so this is now like an enforcement, right, by trading standards saying, right, agents, you have to now disclose this information, like under consumer protection rights, like you have to be able to say important facts about this property to a buyer as they go. Now, the portals have a responsibility to disclose this information the same way they had to for EPC, or, you know, you're not really allowed to put price on application anymore. It has to be a full price. The problems for the agents, the pain point is, how do I get all of this data? I can't employ someone to sit there and scroll through all of this stuff. So the portal that's able to say, we'll take away all that friction for you, and we'll make all of that go away, and we'll manage all of that for you. You just stick to being agents. We'll stick to being kind of the technical experts, and we'll bridge that gap for you so that you don't have to worry about it. I mean, that's where we're trying to kind of find our place at the moment. But I think, Edmund, for like the more that the consumer gets used to having some of this data and being exposed to it, the more the portals have a job to help the consumer understand what some of those things mean. Because it's not just putting data out there, you have to make it meaningful. Like, you have to translate it. There's a lot of information that you need to be able to take on board. Like, the cognitive effort on it is really, really high. So whose job is it to help the consumer understand that? Whose job is it to help the agent understand that? So that all of this information that's about risk, opportunity, information that affects the quality of your life, your asset valuation, whose job is that to then translate so that everybody is more informed about everything that's there? I'd love to see all of this information on more of the portals. I think that homes.com are making a great job to start it out. They're taking very much the Google stance on it, like the layers, and you can only do things one by one. But you also have to understand what it means. Like, on some of them, it's like, okay, here's the air quality control. What does that mean? I need some context to understand what that means. Does that mean I shouldn't buy there? I should buy there? Because most people are buying within quite a small radius of where they live already. So how does that impact? It has to be about the actual property, which maybe the agents don't want the portals to take that. Maybe they want to be the ones to be able to provide that information.
Yeah. Now, I'm just going to...
That's a good point.
So Ed, I'm going to sort of just throw a bit of a spanner in the works here. I was having a quick look at SimilarWeb. just have a look at homes.com versus Zillow versus realtor.com. Now we all know the I've been reading your articles on the website about the backwards and forwards and the discussion between the groups about the real traffic.
Which traffic view do you agree with?
But let's take SimilarWeb as being directionally correct but equally wrong. But it's wrong. It's wrong for everyone. But it's relative as it matters. And then I was having a bit of a look over time, right? So over April, May, June. So they're going heavy on data, heavy on the consumer experience. You would expect to see two things. You would hope that you'd see an uptick in the number of visits, and more importantly, you'd see an uptick in the time on site.
Yeah.
Engagement with the product itself. So since April, May, June, they've lost 20% of the traffic. So homes.com has lost 20% of its traffic, down from 50 million visits a month in April down to 40 million in June. Same time, Zillow has gone from 330 million to 330 million, so it's flat in the period. And Realtor.com is 132 through to 129. So what we've seen is that the two big ones have been literally flat, but the other guy's gone down. And I think what's happened is they've thrown a lot of money at the problem. They've bought traffic that's gone, okay, I'll have a look, and then disappear again. And what reflects that, because then you say, if that is the hypothesis, then what would we expect to see? We expect to see a higher bounce rate. And yes, Homes.com has the highest bounce rate, 56% versus 42% on Zillow. And you'd expect to see a shorter visit duration. Okay, 3.5 minutes versus 6 minutes, and 5.5 minutes on Realtor.com. So what we're seeing is a lot of useless traffic being purchased, or cheap traffic being purchased that's not linking in and becoming engaged with the product, because they're not seeing a movement up in the time on site. And then you look at page views, which is the other sort of metric here. Pages per visit is 6 on homes.com and 12 on Zillow. Okay, so all these metrics are pointing to short-term traffic purchase, artificial bump, not long-term stickiness. Because if you did, you'd expect to see them flat while everyone else is flat. At least they would have all maintained position, but they've dropped. So my hypothesis that I would test is I absolutely think that all this data is very, very important, and consumers should have access to it. But it'll be interesting to see whether it actually makes a difference at the end of the day. And in the UK, where there's, and I think you were talking about for a requirement by the government for the real estate agent to provide more information, or have the capacity to provide more information, if that makes sense.
No.
Allowing you, if you want to know about zoning or wildlife restrictions or whatever, that they should have it. Where that requirement, I don't believe exists in the US. It's it's sort of good luck, go find out for yourself. And it'll be all in the disclosures when you buy the property. Anyway, and that's why you do things like title, insurance, and so on.
Yeah, but they insure against it a lot of this stuff in the US, whereas that it doesn't exist so much in the UK.
So I think the real interesting question on here is that these things absolutely make a lot of intellectual sense, but will they achieve the outcome?
Will it translate to the consumer?
Yeah, and that's
is it just annoying journalists like me who get het up about real estate portals not putting everything on their products? It could be that.
Because I think your viewpoint is very much from like the consumer angle. Like, to have the best user experience is to have all this information and do it. The most of the customers are coming from agents who said, I can remember at Zoopla who prided themselves on what's your house worth, right? That's their unique standpoint that they wanted to differentiate themselves. Agents hate it. They're like, I don't tell the customer how much their house is worth. That's my job to go out and do that. And the amount of feedback that you had, like negatively, when we changed the AVM, was such a headache, because everyone's like, you've just changed, my house has just dropped 200,000 in value. It's like, well, no, it's just a model, right? But trying to explain that to the consumers is really hard. And then the pushback from the agents is, don't give the customers too much information. That's my job to do. And I don't want you to tell any negative story. So if you were looking at somewhere, let's say the crime rate is really bad in a particular area, the agent does not want to highlight that. But from a consumer, where safety is the number one priority when they're looking at purchasing a new home for their family, they want to know that. So who is more important to you in that part of the story?
Yeah, it's a question that we see pretty much, I'd say, every episode that comes up, more or less. Hannah, thank you very much for coming on. I know you've got another meeting in a couple of minutes, so we're going to let you go. Got you on to talk about data and Addland and ended up talking about homes.com and realtor.com. It happens. Yeah, thank you very much for coming on. I think, well, I'm definitely a big fan of Addland. I'd encourage everybody out there who wants to see a good, interesting real estate portal product to go and check it out as well.
Okay. And Hannah, thank you very much. And I'd like to invite you to speak at the conference in Barcelona, if you can do it, in October.
On the spot.
A girl on the stage.
It has been known to happen before.
Why did you? I know that you always try and promote more women in the space, but it's hard.
But no, I would love to have you come and talk about what you guys are doing and the matching of data.
Be my pleasure. Be my pleasure.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thank you guys very much.
We'll see you in Barcelona then. Thank you very much.